what should not be forming part of those conversations is, as the BBC's Newsnight political editor Nick Watt had reported to them by senior Labour sources, is that the conversations involved saying, unless you do us this favour and bend the long-established rules of the House, we will make sure that you are kicked out as Speaker after the next election.
Do you think that's
when we have the MPs to do so?
Do you think that happened? In your heart, do you believe that there was a sort of quid pro quo offered there?
Well, I believe the threat was made.
It's been, as much as I can remember in recent times, people with a view on what happened in Parliament yesterday. Now, we've heard the Conservative Maria Caulfield, we've heard Labour's Pat McFadden. Neither accepted any responsibility so far for the chaos in the Commons. Maria Caulfield said effectively it was Lindsay Hoyle's fault. Labour's Pat McFadden said it was the Tories' fault. Let's see if the SNP, whose original motion it was, of course, have any regrets. We can speak now to Richard Thomson, the SNP for Gordon. Morning to you.
Good morning.
Do you accept any responsibility for this? People will be saying that the SNP played politics with a serious, tragic humanitarian crisis and actually, on the day, ended up getting what you deserved.
Oh, what a load of absolute cobblers if anyone's actually promulgating that. I mean, look, the SNP had an opposition day. The way Westminster works, the way it favours the two big parties usually, we don't get many of them. We decided to use that debating time to discuss the very serious situation in Gaza, which, in common with a lot of other MPs, is what is currently filling up my inbox with concerned constituents. So, first of all, we had an absolute right to raise this issue, and it was absolutely right that we did. And what really disappoints me is that instead of debating the substance of what was discussed yesterday, the plight of the 30,000 men, women and children who've lost their lives in Gaza, the collective punishment that's being inflicted on the people of Gaza, the plight, of course, of the Israeli hostages, we're instead now involved in debating Westminster at its worst and discussing procedural angles and the future of the Speaker. And that is absolutely not what should have been the output.
Do you mind that, though? Because the SNP wants to make Westminster look ridiculous because that's part of your overall policy.
We're here to be serious parliamentarians and to raise concerns that affect our constituents. And if you don't mind me saying so, Stig, that's a pretty crude caricature of what the SNP is about here. So, certainly it's shown Westminster at its worst. It didn't need any input from us in order to do that. But it's really quite extraordinary that instead of discussing the issue of substance, you've got, as I say, this Westminster at its worst and the finger pointing going on, when what we should have been discussing and reflecting on is the plight of the people in Gaza, the need for that immediate ceasefire, and the way that the Labour Party has, as a result of this motion, gradually had to inch forward to a position of backing an immediate ceasefire. But instead, because of the way the Speaker chose to ignore the very clear advice he was given by the clerks, because of the way the Labour Party chose not to engage with other parties in the chamber to accommodate their unique perspective on this, we've ended up with Keir Starmer and his chief whip putting pressure in an unprecedented and frankly disgraceful manner on the Speaker, who sadly seems to have been weak enough to be willing to buckle to it. And that is what's left us where we are.
Well, we just had Pat McFadden on Asma put exactly that to him, and he said the chief whip talks to the Speaker all the time. The leader of the opposition talks to the Speaker all the time. That was just how Parliament does its business.
They may speak to the Speaker regularly, I would expect them to, but what should not be forming part of those conversations is, as the BBC's Newsnight political editor Nick Watt had reported to them by senior Labour sources, is that the conversations involved saying, unless you do us this favour and bend the long-established rules of the House, we will make sure that you are kicked out as Speaker after the next election.
Do you think that's
when we have the MPs to do so?
Do you think that happened? In your heart, do you believe that there was a sort of quid pro quo offered there?
Well, I believe the threat was made. It was quite extraordinary. In the lead up to the debate, there was a series of utterly specious points of order being made by a succession of Labour MPs. Chris Bryant stood up and filibuster talked out a 10-minute rule bill on minibus licensing, of all things. I know Chris a while. I've never known him to have such an interest in minibuses and their licensing before. All of that was to allow extra time to put the thumb screws on the Speaker, and that's clearly what was happening. And in the end, the Speaker has done nobody any favours by trying to change the procedures of the House.
Should he go? Should he resign?
Well, I like my party leader in Westminster, Stephen Flynn, I'm going to take significant convincing that his position is not now untenable. I haven't yet signed that motion that was put down by Bill Ragg about this, but I think the behaviour yesterday procedurally was shabby. It was poor, it was weak. And as I say, it's been a complete distraction from what we ought to have had uppermost in our minds at all time, which was the plight of the people of Gaza and Israel at this present moment.
There's this argument that once the speakers lost, Michael Martin lost fewer. There was a motion similar to an early day motion similar about Michael Martin. Fewer people signed it. He had to go 2 days later. You've not signed this motion yet, but plenty of people have. You say you'll take some convincing. You've said it's shabby. That feels like we're not far away from this being genuinely untenable in your view for the Speaker.
I think there's possibly a sad inevitability about this. Look, I like the Speaker personally. I think he has certain strengths in the chair, but yesterday we did not see that. And the only appropriate response was to say, these are the rules of the House. If you need to go and do your politics elsewhere as a Labour Party to get your views better reflected in the chamber, then off you go and do it. But I'm not going to allow my office to be pressurised in this manner. So go off and do what you need to do, and I will do what I need to do in order to ensure the effective conducting of the business in the chamber. And that is not what's happened, and it's what's led us, as I say, to discussing a procedural wrangle on the future of the Speaker, rather than what we really should have been discussing, which was the plight of the people in the Middle East.
Just finally, what do you think that... Is it embarrassing? Is it kind of a matter of shame that our national parliament is reduced to this? You talk about Chris Bryant talking, filibustering. No one understands a 10-minute rule bill. No one understands these points of order. No one understands why an amendment comes first or second. No one in the real world gets this. They want people to have consciences and debate their consciences in front of them and reflect the consciences of the constituents. That's what people want. They don't want this arcane jibber-jabber, I don't think.
Well,
Is that a problem that needs to be fixed?
Well, yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it's one of the reasons I take the political view I do, and I'm in the party I'm in. I think Westminster is a arcane, backward-looking place with the procedures and the nonsense that often goes on there about the way it's designed to keep MPs busy being busy and to tie us up in these kind of procedural knots, the only beneficiaries of whom are usually the government. And, if I thought Westminster was reformable, I might be more interested in the business of trying to reform it. But, I don't think that that's achievable. And I think there are far too many MPs who are in love with the arcanery and the chicanery that goes on.
And people will say
that... And yesterday was one of the very, very worst, most obnoxious examples of what happens.
But people will say that the SNP began that chicanery because you phrased the motion to try and screw the Labour Party up. That's what people will say. That the chicanery went on, and the chicanery went on all out throughout the evening.
Sorry, Stig, I must stop you. Are you really suggesting that the SNP in the Parliament of the United Kingdom, which retains responsibility for international relations, should not have had the opportunity to put forward what we deeply and sincerely believe about the situation?
I'm saying that some people believe.
The opportunity.
I'm saying some people believe, Richard Thomson, that you did it in order to trip the Labour Party up. People do believe that. Now you can deny it and you can say very clearly, as you are doing, but I am saying that charge against the SNP certainly exists.
So does that mean that the SNP shouldn't be raising matters of international affairs in the House of Commons?
I understand the argument. All I'm saying is that people felt that you are part of the politicking yourselves, and you can say that you're not, but some people think that you are.
Well, perhaps, if they think that, there's absolutely nothing I can do to persuade them otherwise, clearly. But it's the Parliament in the UK that retains responsibility for international affairs. We are elected there with a mandate. We raised a matter of significant concern internationally, which is also of concern to constituents of MPs up and down the United Kingdom. And I think to criticise us for using Parliament in the manner in which it is supposed to be there as the crucible, as the debating chamber of the UK, for criticising us for doing that would be frankly ludicrous. Now, I'm not responsible for the Labour Party and the order in which they put their feet in front of each other and whether or not they trip themselves up. But, it was an entirely proper use. That's exactly what people would expect us to do. It's entirely what people should have expected their own MPs to do in the many opposition day debates and government day debates that go to the Conservatives and the Labour Party. And I think there's a legitimate question about why they didn't. And as I say, my big frustration and anger is when we should have been rightly talking and reflecting on the political progress that's now been made, albeit by accident in the Commons, when we should have been reflecting on the situation, the appalling situation in Gaza with the hostages and the 30,000 men, women and children dead. We're instead doing this navel-gazing, and people are obsessed about the process and the pantomime. And that, if anything, is showing how broken Westminster is, it's that.
Richard Thomson, thank you very much indeed. He's the SNP MP for Gordon. And you